So today I want to talk about a country that almost nobody is discussing in the context of today's global tensions. Everyone is talking about America, Iran, Israel, China, and Saudi Arabia. But there is one country sitting quietly in the background, watching everything very carefully, that I believe could emerge as one of the biggest unexpected beneficiaries of how the world is changing. And that country is Japan. Now I know what you're thinking. Japan? Really? A country with one of the oldest populations in the world, a country that has struggled with slow economic growth for decades, a country that imports most of what it needs to function, a country that seems vulnerable in a world of rising geopolitical competition. That Japan? Yes. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why. But first, let's be honest about Japan's challenges, because they are real. Japan's challenges. Japan faces some serious structural issues. First, demographics. Japan has one of the oldest populations globally. Over 28% of its people are above 65, and that number continues to rise. An aging population means fewer workers, slower growth, and increasing pressure on younger generations. Second, the economy. For decades, Japan has experienced low growth and periods of falling prices. Compared to faster-growing economies, this has made Japan seem like it's moving in slow motion. Third, resource dependence. Japan is a small island nation with limited natural resources. It relies heavily on imports for energy and raw materials, making it sensitive to global supply disruptions. And finally, geography. Japan depends on global trade routes for energy and goods. Any instability in key regions can create uncertainty for its economy. So on paper, Japan looks like a country facing serious limitations. And yet, if I had to place a long-term bet, I would still choose Japan. Let me explain why. What history tells us. To understand Japan, you have to think like a historian, not just an economist. Economic data shows challenges, but history shows patterns, how a nation responds when facing pressure or uncertainty. Let's look at three key moments. First, during the Mongol invasions in the 13th century, Japan faced one of the most powerful empires of that time. Despite being divided internally, the country showed unity and resilience in the face of an overwhelming challenge. Second, in the 19th century, when global powers were expanding their influence across Asia, Japan made a remarkable transformation. Within a single generation, it modernized its economy, military, and institutions, becoming a major industrial nation. Third, after World War II, Japan faced total devastation. Its cities and economy were in ruins. And yet, within a few decades, it rebuilt itself into one of the world's leading manufacturing and technological powers. These moments highlight something important. Japan has repeatedly shown an ability to adapt, rebuild, and transform under pressure. Why Japan could benefit from global changes. Now, let's connect this to today. The world is shifting in three major ways. Countries are focusing more on self-reliance, strengthening security capabilities, and rethinking global trade. At first glance, these changes seem challenging for Japan, but they also create opportunities. First, innovation and security. Japan is already investing in advanced technologies, AI, robotics, and next-generation systems. Its strength in precision engineering and technology gives it an edge as countries prioritize resilience. Second, efficiency. Japan is one of the most energy-efficient economies in the world. In a future where resources may become more expensive or constrained, that efficiency becomes a major advantage. Third, global engagement. Unlike some countries that focus inward, Japan has always been outward-looking. Trading, collaborating, and adapting to global trends. That mindset positions it well in a changing world economy. So if you had to think long-term, 10 to 20 years ahead, which country is best positioned to adapt to a changing global landscape? For me, the answer is Japan. Not because it doesn't have problems, it does, but because of how it has responded to challenges throughout history. Again and again, when facing difficult circumstances, Japan has shown resilience, creativity, and the ability to transform itself, often faster than expected. And today, the world is entering another period of uncertainty and change. These are exactly the kinds of conditions where Japan has historically performed at its best. So while it may not look dominant today, Its future potential could surprise many. Conclusion. Japan has real challenges: aging population, slow growth, limited resources, and dependence on global trade. So, what does all of this really mean? We've talked about Japan's challenges. We've talked about its history. We've talked about the way the world is changing right now. But now we need to step back and ask a bigger question. What kind of country actually succeeds in a world like this? Because the truth is, we are not living in a normal period of history. For the last 30 to 40 years, the global system was relatively stable. Trade was expanding. Supply chains were spreading across continents. Countries specialized in what they did best, and everything became more interconnected. That world is changing. And when the rules of the system change, the winners change too. The countries that thrived in the old system are not guaranteed to thrive in the new one. So instead of asking, who is strongest today? The better question is, who is best prepared for the kind of world we are moving into? And this is where Japan becomes incredibly interesting, because Japan was never perfectly optimized for the old system. It wasn't the fastest growing economy. It wasn't the most resource-rich country. It didn't dominate global headlines. But what if that's exactly why it's positioned differently now? What if the very things that made Japan seem weaker in the past are the same things that make it more adaptable today? Think about that for a second. Japan has spent decades dealing with slow growth. That means it has already learned how to operate in a low-growth environment, something many other countries are just beginning to experience. Japan has spent decades improving efficiency. That means it knows how to do more with less, something that becomes incredibly valuable in a resource-constrained world. Japan has spent decades refining technology, manufacturing, and precision industries. That means it has deep expertise in areas that are becoming more important, not less. And perhaps most importantly, Japan has spent decades existing in a state of quiet pressure: economic, demographic, and geopolitical. And when a country lives under pressure for a long time, something happens. It adapts. It becomes disciplined. It becomes resilient in ways that are not always visible from the outside. Now compare that to countries that have only experienced rapid growth and expansion. What happens when their environment changes? What happens when growth slows? What happens when resources become more expensive? What happens when global systems become less predictable? Those are very different challenges. Japan has already been through them, and that matters more than most people realize, because the future is not about who looks strongest in perfect conditions. The future is about who performs best under changing conditions, and Japan has a long track record of adapting to change. Now let's go even deeper, because there's another layer to this that is often overlooked, and that is culture. Not in a superficial sense, but in terms of how a society responds to difficulty. Every country has strengths. Every country has weaknesses. But what really defines long-term success is how a country behaves when things don't go according to plan. Do people panic? Do institutions break down? Does decision-making become chaotic? Or does the country stay coordinated, focused, and disciplined? Japan has repeatedly shown a tendency toward coordination and long-term thinking. It values stability. It values precision. It values gradual improvement. And while those traits may seem slow in times of rapid expansion, they become incredibly powerful in times of uncertainty, because in uncertain environments, reckless speed becomes a liability. Consistency becomes an advantage. Now think about the industries of the future: advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, robotics, automation, energy efficiency, high-precision engineering. These are not industries that reward chaos. They reward discipline. They reward attention to detail. They reward long-term investment. And these are exactly the areas where Japan has deep experience. This is not accidental. This is the result of decades of focus. Now, does that mean Japan will dominate everything? No. That's not the argument. The argument is not that Japan will suddenly become the most powerful country in the world. The argument is that Japan is underestimated, and in times of change, underestimated countries often outperform expectations because they are not under the same pressure to maintain dominance. They are not forced to defend an existing global position. They can adapt quietly. They can evolve without attracting too much attention, and that creates opportunity. Now let's bring this back to a practical level. Imagine you're an investor. You're not trying to predict headlines for the next 6 months. You're trying to understand where the world is going over the next 10 to 20 years. You're looking for stability, adaptability, and long-term potential. What do you choose? Do you choose the country that looks strongest right now but faces structural adjustments? Or do you choose the country that has already gone through decades of adjustment and come out stable? That's the key difference. Japan has already absorbed many of the shocks that other countries are just beginning to face, and that gives it a different kind of strength. A quieter strength, a less visible strength, but a very real one. Now, here's another important point. The future is not going to be dominated by a single country. It's going to be more fragmented, more regional, more complex. And in a fragmented world, the ability to build partnerships becomes critical. Japan has a strong track record of working with other countries. It has built relationships across Asia, Europe, and North America. It is seen as reliable. It is seen as stable. It is seen as predictable. And those qualities matter a lot when uncertainty increases, because when things become unpredictable, countries look for partners they can trust, and Japan fits that role. Now let's talk about perception, because perception shapes reality more than most people think. Right now, Japan is often viewed as a slow country, a country that already had its peak, a country that is stable but not dynamic. But history shows that these kinds of perceptions can change very quickly, especially when the global environment shifts, because when the world changes, people start looking at the same countries differently. They start valuing different strengths. They start asking different questions. And suddenly, countries that were overlooked start to look very attractive. That's how shifts happen, not gradually, but all at once. Now let's be clear, none of this is guaranteed. Japan still has serious challenges. Its population trends are real, its economic constraints are real, its resource limitations are real, but every country has challenges. The question is not whether challenges exist, the question is how a country responds to them. And if history is any guide, Japan tends to respond in a very specific way. It studies the situation carefully, it adapts its strategy, and then it executes with precision. Not loudly, not dramatically, but effectively. And over time, those small, consistent advantages add up. Now imagine the world 15 years from now. Global systems have shifted, supply chains look different, technology has advanced even further, energy systems have evolved, and countries have had to adapt in different ways. In that world, which countries are likely to feel stable? Which countries are likely to have maintained balance? Which countries are likely to have quietly strengthened their position? Japan has a strong case, not because it avoided challenges, but because it learned how to live with them and adapt through them. And that's a very different kind of strength. So when I say Japan could be a surprise winner, what I really mean is this. Japan could outperform expectations. It could do better than most people currently assume. It could evolve in ways that are not obvious today, but become clear in hindsight. Because that's how it has operated in the past. Quietly, consistently, and effectively. Now let me leave you with one final thought. The biggest mistake people make when analyzing countries is focusing too much on the present. They look at current numbers, current headlines, current narratives, but the present is just a snapshot. What really matters is direction. Where is a country going? How is it adapting? What capabilities is it building? And how does it behave under pressure? Because the future belongs to countries that can adapt, not just grow. And Japan has shown again and again that adaptation is one of its core strengths. So the next time you hear someone say Japan is stagnant, or Japan is declining, or Japan has already peaked, ask a different question. What if Japan is simply preparing for a different kind of world, a world where efficiency matters more than scale, where resilience matters more than speed, where discipline matters more than hype? Because in that kind of world, Japan doesn't look weak. It looks ready. C. If you found this perspective useful, make sure to subscribe for more deep dive analysis explained in simple terms. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think Japan is underestimated, or do you believe another country is better positioned for the future? Let me know in the comments.